Hello and welcome to part 2 in a series of videos that I'm putting out where I break down all the fights taking place at UFC on ESPN Plus 11 from a betting perspective. Now I've already covered 3 fights on this card, including the main event between Alexander Gustafsson and Anthony Smith. You can find my breakdown for that fight in part 1, which I will leave a link to in the description below. And in today's video I will be busting through another 3 fights. Now don't forget, if you would like me to do a live stream where I answer all your questions about the fights taking place at UFC Stockholm, and I also try and find you a decent value prop bet for all the fights taking place on this card, hit the like button below. And if every single video that I put out for UFC Stockholm gets 300 likes, that's part 1, 2, 3 and 4, if they all get 300 likes, I will do that video. And remember, we did very well on prop bets on the last card. We made a very good event, a very good profit. I don't want to go back over it now, but if you watch part 1 of this video, you will see the kind of profits we were able to make. And if you don't know what a prop bet is basically a highly specific bet. So there's none really available at the moment because they only tend to get released, a few days before the event is scheduled to take place, and we're now well over a week before UFC Stockholm takes place. But a prop bet would basically be something like Alexander Gustafsson to win by knockout. So if you want me to find a decent value prop bet for every single one of these fights taking place at UFC Stockholm, hit the like button below, and I will do that live stream probably on fight day on the 1st of June. So, and just to let you guys know, the reason why I like doing the live streams on fight day is because obviously everyone that watches these videos, we're all in different time zones, and by me doing it on a weekend, it just makes it more likely that more people can watch. Whereas if I do it on a Friday, some people might be in work, that kind of thing, or they might not be able to stay up late if they've got work the next day. So that's why I like to do the live streams on fight day as often as I can. So let's jump into the first fight that I want to get into in today's video, which is Stosic against Devin Clark. Now, it's very hard to have strong feelings on this fight because Stosic has only had one fight in the UFC, which ended very quickly. And for that reason, it's kind of difficult to get a read on him. Now, you will often hear me say that I don't need to necessarily see a guy fight a decent level of opponent to be able to gauge his skills. Something I hear a lot of people say is, we don't know. It was an argument that people were using for Adesanya by saying, he hadn't really fought anyone when he beat Kelvin Gastelum. And it's an argument you hear all the time. You hear people say, he hasn't fought anyone. But that doesn't bother me. Usually you don't need to see a fighter fight a decent level of opponent to gauge how good they are, because the techniques that they usually display will enable you to gauge how good they are even when they're facing a low level opponent. So some examples of this were Vivian Araujo and Mike Grundy. We bet on both those fighters at underdog odds this year when they made their UFC debut, and they both won. And we were able to bet on both those fighters because even though they had only fought a low level of opponent up until this point in their career where they made their UFC debut, the technique that they displayed in their past fights sent strong signals that they were absolutely legit. And sometimes you get very strong signals and a fighter like Grundy or Araujo is going to be very good. They may not be that good in their UFC debut, but in time they're going to live up to their expectations and become absolutely excellent. Whereas every once in a while you get fighters like a Stosic come along, which are a little bit more difficult to read. Because Stosic looks like he could be an excellent fighter, but it's still just a little bit too early to be 100% sure. I do think there's a chance that he's going to be excellent. He is only 27 years old. He's going to be improving at a very rapid rate. But at the same time, I guess from his past fights that I've watched, it's more inconclusive than how I felt when I watched, Grundy and also Araujo when they came in the UFC. And now I'm going to show you some of his past fights so that you can kind of see what I mean. So the first fight that I want to show you is is against Thomas Szyvinski. So this was the fight that he competed in immediately before he made his debut in the UFC. And just one thing that I do want to point out before we get into watching some of the footage on Stosic is that there is a potential that his record has been very, very heavily padded. He's 13-1, which is a very good record on paper, but as you can see, Szyvinski was 9-15, had a losing record. Zahariev with a decent record. Dion Starin's been around forever, not a bad record, but then below that, you can see the vast majority of these wins, these 13 wins, have come against a really low level of opponent. Here we can see a guy 6-4, 2-2, guy that made his pro debut, 1-1. We actually know Jiri Prochazka is actually a legit fighter. He fights in Rising, he's very good. But then past that, 2-1, 13-22, 2-0-1. Very low level of opponent. So let's jump into this fight here against Thomas Szyvinski. And this fight, like I said, took place just before Stosic made his UFC debut. And this fight took place around about, call it 18 months ago. Around about 18 months. So here we go. Now, before we get into this, I never want to accuse promotion of fight fixing. Never want to accuse a promotion of fight fixing. But this win looks sketchy as fuck. Just have a look and let me know what you think. So obviously Stosic is in the blue shirts, and this fight doesn't last very long. Just throwing out some range-finding strikes there, some jabs to the body and a leg kick, and then, that's the end of the fight. Very, very strange. Like I say, I don't like to accuse anyone or anything of fight fixing, but if we just watch this back a few times, just look at the way this guy goes down from a pouring left hook. Really, really suspicious. I'll play it one last time. Just the way this guy goes down from a pouring left hook is just a very weird way to fall, a very weird way to react to a pouring left hook that doesn't even land that clean. Just very, very strange. So, I'm not going to accuse any promotion of fight fixing, but if you want to find an example of a fight that looks like it could be fixed, that's a pretty fucking good one. This guy's 9-15. What real incentive has he got to win? He's probably looked pretty old as well. How old is he? Doesn't say. Look, I just wanted to play with that fight because it was his last fight before he got into the UFC, and it kind of shows the level of the opponent that Stosic has faced throughout the majority of his career. So then we go on to this other fight against Emil Zahariev, and again, if we look at this fight, Zahariev's actually probably got the best record out of everyone that Stosic has ever fought. This fight took place about 2 years ago. Zahariev at 22-7 indicates that he might actually be pretty decent. But if we just let this fight unfold, again we see Stosic in the blue shorts. I'm sorry guys, my nose is just really itchy. I have no idea why. But Stosic is in the blue shorts. And we'll just let this fight unfold. Again, it doesn't last very long at all. Stosic just throwing out some range-finding strikes. A nice inside leg kick there. And the fight doesn't last long at all. Then a nice kick to the body. That looked like it might have hurt Zahariev a little bit because it had him backing up. And with Zahariev fighting out of the southpaw stance, obviously, with Stosic fighting out of the orthodox stance, that opens up Zahariev's body. Two very powerful inside leg kicks and body kicks. And this fight doesn't take long, guys, I promise you that. Will be over very soon. There we can see again, Zahariev actually struggling with a fighter from the orthodox stance here, throwing power kicks into his legs and body. Definitely not liking them. Here we can see a little bit of Stosic's takedown defense on display. And what was quite impressive about this takedown defense here was that Zahariev actually shoots quite a nice deep double leg here. We can see him getting quite deep on Stosic's hips. Doesn't have his hands connected together, but this is still quite a deep shot. And what's impressive about Stosic's takedown defense here is that he's being driven into a ring. And obviously, when you're not being driven into a cage, it's very hard to stuff a really deep shot when you're being driven into a cage, because there's nothing to fall back on and create a base against, and actually be able to use as a structure to create a wide base and defend the takedown. But here, even though he gets driven into the ring, he still manages to maintain strong hips, good balance, and stuff the takedown. And from there, fight should end any second now, with very strange circumstances again. Stosic throwing a very nice head kick there. Not really much telegraph at all. Another very nice inside leg kick lands. They're starting to add up. I'm pretty sure the finish comes any second now. Yes, it does. Within the next 10-15 seconds. Another very nice inside leg kick from Stosic. And then another inside leg kick, and that is basically all over. Zahariev doesn't want any more of that. So I'm not going to say that that fight was fixed, because, you know, Stosic definitely landed a lot of nice inside leg kicks in that fight, which would have started to add up and do damage to a guy like Zahariev. He was also wearing leggings, so I'm not sure if that was because, you know, he's got a knee brace or something underneath. He's trying to conceal it, wherever. It's not important. Who cares? All I'm saying is there's no smoke without fire, and Stosic has fought a lot of low-level guys throughout his career, and the two finishes in this fight were really suspect. That's all I'm saying. But who gives a fuck? Who really gives a fuck? We're just trying to work out how good he is and what chance he's got of beating Devin Clark. So then I want to show you the third fight from Stosic that we can use to try and gauge what he brings to the table, how good he's going to be against Devin Clark. And here he is against Dion Starin. Starin is a Strikeforce alumni. He's fought some big names in MMA, including Daniel Cormier. He fought him back in Strikeforce. So this was a legitimate test for Darko Stosic, and he fought him, I believe, well, he's fought him twice, but this fight took place in December 2016. So this fight was about 2.5 years ago. So we've seen a little bit of Stosic in the last fight that I showed you against Zahariev, and you can see, you know, very nice kicks. You know, he uses his body kicks and his leg kicks to set up a powerful head kick that didn't land on Zahariev, but the setup was there from the leg kicks and the body kicks. You know, if you throw enough hard leg kicks and hard body kicks, you'll get your opponent thinking about defending the body kicks and the leg kicks, and then when you've got him focusing on defending the body kicks and leg kicks, you can go upstairs and try and land the head kick knockout. And that's what Stosic was trying to do in that fight against Zahariev. He didn't get it, but we can see definitely got a nice kicking game. And here we can also see he caught Starin with a very nice right straight there. And Stosic is a very technical striker. You know, not overly aggressive, but good setups, good technique. You know, no telegraph in his strikes really. For such a big guy, he's very technical, very composed. And I also like how he throws a very diverse range of strikes. You know, leg kicks, body kicks, head kicks, you know, different combinations. Very, very nice. So I don't want this video to end up being really, really, really long. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking you through what you can see in this fight, because it's available on YouTube. You can just go watch it yourself. But what I would say is, based on the striking that I've seen from Stosic in this fight and also in the other fights that I've watched from him, I do give him an advantage over Devin Clark when it stays standing. And as we know, Devin Clark is primarily a wrestler, primarily a grappler. So we've really got to evaluate who might get the better of this fight. If it ends up being a grappling-based fight with some wrestling and some clinch work, and obviously if this fight goes to the ground. So I do think Stosic is going to have the advantage when it comes to striking. But in this fight, there are also some clues as to how Starin might fare against Clark if this fight does turn into be a predominantly grappling-based fight. Now, we saw in the last matchup against Zahariev, Stosic was able to defend a very deep takedown shot against the ring ropes, which was very impressive. And Starin also tests his takedown defense a little bit in this fight. If we just skip ahead into the second round, at around about this point in a fight, we can see any second now Starin shoots a very nice takedown again, very nice deep double leg entry. Here I can't quite see if Starin has got his hands connected on this double leg takedown, but again, it's not easy to be defending these kind of takedowns in a ring. It's very difficult. It's much easier to defend these type of takedowns in a cage, where you can use the cage to create a wide base and get your balance and stand back up. But Starin shoots a very, very deep double leg takedown there. There we can see again Stosic showing strong hips, good balance, which isn't easy to do against the cage. And he also starts, it actually does look like it does look like Starin has got his hands connected here around the legs of Stosic, because Stosic starts to show some panic and urgency in an attempt to break the grip to prevent Starin from being able to complete this takedown. Obviously, we don't know from this camera angle where the Starin has got his hands connected or not, but Stosic certainly showed some urgency in dropping down to try and break the grip. But nonetheless, okay, so we can actually see there that Starin didn't have his hands connected on a double leg, had his hands connected around the single leg here. We could just about see it there, and that is why Stosic moves to try and break the grip of Starin. But Stosic does a great job then of not enabling Starin to complete the takedown. Does a good job of preventing Starin from chaining into a double leg. Good job of keeping strong hips and clearing his legs and winding up in top position, which is very, very nice. So we can see Stosic, definitely not an easy guy to take down and control on the ground. So then if we just skip ahead a bit further into the fight, this goes into the third round. Now we've seen a little bit of Stosic's takedown defense in these last two fights that I've shown you. Now we're going to see a little bit of his offensive wrestling. And any second now you'll see him shoot a very nice deep takedown entry on Starin. Didn't have his hands connected on that double leg, but still managed to complete it. And in this sequence, we're going to see some more from Stosic, which is pretty impressive. Here we can see stepped over into half guard, very nice, which is a very dominant position, a very safe position to be in from the half guard. I mean, the half guard is probably the safest position to be in when you're on the ground, because it's very hard for your opponent to hit a reversal. Also very hard for your opponent can't really threaten with any submissions from half guard. And here now we see, unfortunately, Stosic has given Starin a little bit of space to work his way back to his feet. So Starin takes that space. Here we can see a little bit of space being created there. So Starin uses that to pop back to his feet. Tries to get in on his own takedown. We see Starin try and get control of Stosic's body here by connecting his hands around Stosic's body. But again, Stosic showing very strong hips, turns into Starin, and even though Starin has got control of Stosic's body here with his two hands connected around Stosic's body, I mean, Stosic does get a little bit of help there from grabbing hold of the ropes to stay standing. But again, this is hard to defend this technique in a ring. Stosic's balance and strong hips would have helped him really have a much better job of defending that initial body lock takedown if that was in a cage. But anyway, he's got away with the grabbing the ropes, and here we can see him battling for underhooks now. He's now got his hands connected around Starin's body on a full body lock. So we can see him go to a different kind of takedown here. You know, we saw him initiate this grapple exchange with the double leg takedown. Now he's going to the body lock takedown. See Starin chipping away at him with knees in the clinch. And any second now, you're going to see Stosic change levels here. Get his hands connected around Starin's body and drag him to the ground. Very nice. So a different kind of takedown, a body lock takedown. And we've also got to remember, I mean, yeah, sure, Stosic hasn't been perfect in this fight. He absolutely hasn't. You know, he grabbed the ring, the ropes to basically defend that takedown. But again, we've got to cut him some slack. It's very hard to defend these takedowns in a ring as opposed to in a cage. And we've also got to bear in mind the fact that this fight took place 2.5 years ago. You know, Stosic would have been only 24 or 25 years old back then. So he's bound to have improved a hell of a lot since then. So I do like what I'm seeing from Stosic. And I just wanted to give you that brief overview, just so you can kind of get an idea of what he brings to the table, what weapons he's got in his fight against Devin Clark. So I have absolutely no doubt that with Stosic being such a young guy, I've no doubt that he's improved a lot since that Starin fight. So what we do know about him is he's a technical striker, very nice, sharp technical kicks, throws a wide range of strikes, high volume of strikes per round, and he's also powerful. We also know he's got decent cardio because that Starin fight was quite competitive, quite grueling, and even in the third round he still had enough energy to defend takedowns and get takedowns of his own. And also, the slight asterisk next to that is obviously that fight didn't take place under USADA drug testing, so maybe his cardio won't look as good in the UFC. But, based on what we've seen, we can assume his cardio is going to be okay unless he was on PEDs back when he fought Starin, which is a possibility. Also, we know that he's bound to have improved a lot, so I believe the version of Stosic that I saw fight Starin and Zahariev would be pretty competitive against Devin Clark. So, understanding that he's probably improved a lot since then means that he's probably got a very good chance of beating Devin Clark here. But Devin Clark is a tough fight. Even though this is a very winnable fight for Stosic, Clark is no joke. We know Clark is also a strong wrestler. He hits hard. He's got a reasonably heavy top game. And he's quite technical on the ground. But from what I've seen, I do give Stosic an advantage striking, and I definitely feel he's equal to Clark. Clark's just one of these guys that is reasonably good at everything, but great at nothing. And we've also seen Clark get rocked, dropped, or wobbled quite a lot in the UFC. We've also seen him put himself in some bad positions on the ground. He doesn't have the best fight IQ. What I would say about Clark is he does have the cardio to fight at a high pace for 3 rounds. So if Stosic is used to blowing through these low-level guys, and he doesn't come in with 3 rounds worth of cardio to fight at a high pace, that could get him into trouble. And obviously if he did build a career outside of the UFC on PEDs, now that he's in the UFC with USADA drug testing, that could get him into trouble as well. So, if we look at this fight from a betting perspective, we see that Stosic is currently the favourite, although his odds are gradually improving, as we are now just over 1 week away from UFC Stockholm as the time that this video was recorded. So Stosic is currently around about an average of 1.71. If we bring up the odds movement graph, we can see that his odds have steadily improved from his opening line of 1.38, which is money line odds of minus 263. I think those odds are ludicrous. Another example of the bookies not doing their homework. Clark definitely deserved more respect from that, but his odds have been improving since. So if we look at the current odds, average of 1.71, which is minus 141 for an implied probability of 58%. And if we compare that to Devin Clark's odds, which are around about an average of 2.20, which is plus 120 for an implied probability of 45%, I think the odds are very, very accurate on this fight. I think it's fair to cap this fight at 60-40 in Stosic's favour. I do think he's slightly better than Devin Clark everywhere from what I've seen. I'm also factoring in the possibility that he's improved a hell of a lot since we last seen him in a really competitive matchup back in 2016. A young guy like Stosic can improve a hell of a lot in the last 2.5 years. And Devin Clark, like I say, he's one of these guys that doesn't blow your hair back. Very, very average. A little bit chinny, puts himself in bad positions on the ground, and even though this is a very tough fight for Stosic, I believe he's got the skills to win. Now, obviously, it's tough to feel confident in either guy here. We don't know that much about Stosic yet, which means I can't bet him at these odds. And also, Devin Clark's not exactly the kind of guy you'd want to trust your money on in a marginal position against a hard-hitting technical striker with a decent level of grappling as well. So this fight's an easy pass for me at the current odds. Should be a very, very competitive match, though. I think it's a great fight. I would pass. I do slightly lean Stosic, but his current odds of around 1.71, give him an implied probability of 58%. So to bet him here, you'd have to give him a 65 to 70% chance of winning, and I think that's crazy. You can't get there. There are too many unanswered questions, but I think capping him at 60% is very, very reasonable. I have no problem with it. I think the bookies have capped this fight very accurately, and the odds are spot on. And like I always say, that's to be expected. You know, betting sites at the end of the day are in this business to make money. They are in this business to force you into making bad betting decisions. They really are. And it's no surprise that the majority of the time the odds are going to be accurate on a fight. You know, these are multinational, multi-billion-dollar companies. You know, a company like Bet365, one of those profitable businesses in the United Kingdom. So it's no surprise that they do cap fights accurately, you know, more often than not, and they try and smoke you out of your hole and force you into making bad betting decisions. You know, a lot of people might be seeing Devin Clark as a decent bet, a slight underdog, knowing that Stosic is very inexperienced. It's only his second fight in the UFC. So the bookies will set the odds very accurately on this in the hope that they'll bait people into making bad betting decisions, and more often than not they do. That's why the majority of people lose. That's why the majority of people never make money betting, and that's why the majority of people don't know that Denise Coates, the owner of Bet365, is the best paid woman in the world. There you go. She is a British billionaire and the owner of Bet365. So that is why that's why Denise Coates is balling out of control, because there are people out there that force bets on fights like this between Stosic and Clark where the odds are very accurate. So now we move on to the next fight between Christos Giagos against Damir Hadzovic. And in this fight, we've got two guys with major weaknesses that the other could potentially exploit. But because both guys are very flawed, it's a very risky fight to bet on. And this is a classic striker versus grappler matchup. We've got Christos Giagos as the wrestler and Damir Hadzovic as the striker. Now, Hadzovic has a big advantage when it comes to striking. I think if he can keep this fight standing, he should win easily. And Giagos has a big advantage when it comes to wrestling and on the ground. He's a very strong wrestler, very active from top position, and just an overall tough guy, a very strong, hard-nosed American wrestler. But what I've just said is kind of oversimplifying the fight, because there are some intricate details in how these guys match up, which makes predicting a winner in this fight very complicated. And there's a lot to unpack here, because in the past, Hadzovic has shown absolutely dreadful takedown defense. I mean, truly horrendously bad takedown defense. Really bad. It's tough for me to put into words how bad Hadzovic's takedown defense has looked in the past in fights against Alan Patrick and Marcin Held. This guy's takedown defense is absolutely garbage. I mean, it's so bad that when his opponent shoots into a takedown, you'll sometimes actually see him jump to the ground. Like, he won't even try and defend it. It's absolutely terrible. Really bad. I need to emphasize how bad Hadzovic's takedown defense is here, which means it's basically very hard to bet him against anyone in the UFC, because it's very possible against anyone that he fights, he might just get lay and prayed. So Giagos, being a wrestler, might seem like a good bet, might naturally seem like a good bet, because if we look at the odds, Giagos is currently a big underdog. Average odds are around about 2.60, which is plus 160 for an implied probability of 39%. And if we compare that to the odds on Damir Hadzovic, which, you know, current average odds of call it around 1.55, which is minus 182 for an implied probability of 65%. You might be thinking, you know, Hadzovic has got terrible takedown defense. He's fighting a wrestler. Hadzovic has got, you know, obviously Giagos is a good bet at underdog odds. But like I say, that's oversimplifying things a little bit, because the devil is in the detail. It really is. Now, the problem with Giagos is that he slows down as the fight goes on. Now, this is where, with fights like this, this is why I make a lot of money betting. I make a hell of a lot of money betting, I'm not going to lie to you, and there'll be videos coming out over the next few weeks that'll kind of show you how much money I make from betting. And I think the reason why I make so much money betting is because I can read fights in ways other people can't read them, and that is not to say I am better than anyone else. I'm not trying to be cocky or big-headed or anything like that. I'm just saying that in fights like this, the devil really is in the detail, and if you dig deep enough and do your homework, you can learn a lot. So Giagos slows down as the fight goes on. He always slows down as the fight goes on. But that's not because he has bad cardio. In fact, Giagos has really good cardio. But if you go back and watch many of his past fights, if you go back and watch against Hirota or Batista, you'll see that he becomes quite sloppy in the third round. But that is not because he's got bad cardio. And a lot of people will make the assumption that Giagos has got bad cardio. That's not true. Giagos doesn't have bad cardio, he has bad pacing. There's a very, very clear distinction between the two. So a fighter with bad cardio is someone like Frank Camacho that we are going to talk about probably in part 3 of this video. So Frank Camacho is a fighter with bad cardio. Giagos isn't a fighter with bad cardio. He actually has excellent cardio, but he's got bad pacing. Because Christos Giagos' style of fighting is from pretty much the first second in the fight to the last second in the fight to spam takedowns relentlessly. Just spam takedowns over and over and over again. And it takes a hell of a lot of energy to do that. There are very few fighters that can do that, which is why there are very few fighters that implement that style of fighting. If we really think about it, only guys like John Fitch, Kamaru Usman are able to continuously spam takedowns for the entire duration of the fight. I mean, some guys can do it, but they slow down. I mean, Ben Askren spams takedowns for the entire duration of a fight, but if you go back and see him in one, he's exactly like Giagos. Very, very sloppy in round 3 because he's continuously spam takedowns, which he doesn't have the cardio to do because he's only a human, which means he's much sloppier and slower in round 3. But you wouldn't say Ben Askren's got bad cardio. It's a pacing issue, it's not a cardio issue. We saw the same thing from Kevin Lee last weekend. Kevin Lee didn't go into that Rafael dos Anjos fight with bad cardio because he was still able to exert a good amount of energy in round 3. Kevin Lee has suffered from bad cardio in the past, but it wasn't cardio that cost him against Rafael dos Anjos. It was bad pacing, because from the first second of the fight, he spammed takedowns and exerted tons of energy and gassed himself out. But that's not bad cardio. That's bad game planning. That's bad tactics. That's bad pacing. And Giagos suffers from the same problem. Comes out first second and just spams takedowns and exerts tons of energy, which means by the third round, he's slowed down. Now that's interesting in a fight like this because Giagos is an excellent offensive wrestler. He really is. He's got great takedown entries, good chain wrestling, and if he wants to put Hadzovic on the ground, he should be able to easily because Hadzovic has got dreadful takedown defense. But what I would like to see from Giagos is more of an intelligent style of fighting, because what he should be doing is utilising the TriStar style of fighting, right? So if you go back and watch, any TriStar fighter, TriStar fighters have got a blueprint for winning. They keep the first 2 or 3 minutes of a round competitive, and then they crank up the volume in the last 1 or 2 minutes, start letting their hands go more, or start working for takedowns in the last 1 or 2 minutes of a round to try and steal the round. It's what TriStar fighters do, and they do that because Firas Zahabi is smart enough to know that you cannot redline it for 15 minutes. You cannot redline it for 5 minutes in a round, or you're going to slow down later on in the fight. You cannot go balls to the wall. If you just redline a car, eventually the engine's going to blow up. You can't do it, so you have to pace yourself. So there's no difference probably between Giagos' cardio and George St. Pierre's cardio. The difference is Giagos is relentlessly spamming takedowns for the entire duration of the fight, which means he slows down, whereas GSP's being intelligent and tactical with it and only shooting 1 or 2 takedowns in the second half of a round so that he's not exerting loads of energy to get fights to the ground. Because what happens is when you get a takedown early in a round, you give your opponent a lot of time to work their way back to the feet, a lot of time for your opponent to reverse position, or a lot of time for the referee to stand you up. So you commit all this energy to getting the fight to the ground, and then if you get stood back up only around about halfway through the round, your opponent's got the rest of the round to try and steal it back off you. So it's bad game planning, bad tactics. That's what cost Kevin Lee against RDA. That's what's basically been costing Christos Giagos throughout his career. But it's important that we talk about this because it's when a fighter lacks a skill, for example, Curtis Melender or Megan Anderson, when they don't have good takedown defense, they've got to work on developing good takedown defense, right? They've got to learn that new skill. Giagos doesn't have to learn any new skills. He just needs to use his skills slightly differently, which is a hell of a lot easier to do. So if he, went back to the drawing board, realised where he was going wrong, and thought, right, what I am now going to do, instead of spamming takedowns from the very first second, I am going to fight a little bit smarter, a little bit more tactically, a little bit craftier, and I'm only going to really aggressively pursue the takedown in the second half of each round. Which means theoretically, I'm using 30 or 40% less energy than I usually would if I relentlessly shot takedowns throughout the entire duration of the fight. And if a guy like Giagos, that's got excellent offensive wrestling, makes that tiny little adjustment, he could be a completely new fighter. And he can have a lot of success, and he could be a nightmare opponent for a guy like Damir Hadzovic. But Giagos has had over 20 pro fights. This issue has been present throughout his career. So if he hasn't addressed it after 20 pro fights, when the fuck is he going to address it? Is he ever going to address it? Is he smart enough to address it? That's not disrespectful. But is he too stubborn to address it? I'm just trying to speak the truth. Has he got terrible coaches? We hear coaches give fighters bad advice all the time in between rounds. Dreadful advice. So are his coaches telling him to fight with this style? Is he getting bad advice? The point I'm trying to make is this fight's difficult to bet on because if Giagos wants to, he can dominate if he comes in and fights smart with a good game plan. He really can. He really can. But after 20 pro fights, he hasn't made the adjustment that I've just talked about. So will he ever? I don't know. And do you want to bet on it? You're putting your money in a lot of danger. You're giving a guy a lot of credit to make an improvement that is not that hard to make, but he's never done it before. And another thing we have to throw into the mix here is when you work hard for a takedown and you complete that takedown, you have to exert a lot of energy. And then usually what happens is you exert loads of energy to get the takedown, you end up in top position. You can have a little bit of control from top position to catch your breath. Obviously, you're still exerting a little bit of energy working for top position. It is tiring. But when you're on top and your opponent's on the bottom, you're forcing your opponent to work much harder to defend themselves. You're forcing your opponent to carry your body weight. So even though you are using energy from top, you can recover better than the opponent who's on the bottom, generally speaking. So usually what would happen is a guy like Giagos would exert loads of energy to get in the top position. Once in top position, he can start recharging his batteries a little bit, or at least not exerting as much energy as he was when the fight was standing and he was working for takedowns. Now what's interesting about this fight is even though Damir Hadzovic has ridiculously bad takedown defense, it's quite impressive how bad Hadzovic's takedown defense is. He is very good at working his way back to his feet. Very, very good at working his way back to his feet. So, if Hadzovic does get taken down and he works his way back to his feet quickly multiple times, that's going to accelerate the rate at which Giagos does slow down, because Giagos is exerting all this energy to get a fight to the ground, and when Hadzovic pops back up, all the energy exerted is for nothing, and if you rinse and repeat that process, Giagos is going to slow down faster. Okay? Now we also have to bear in mind the fact that fighters are on a journey of continual improvement. That's why I always have to really dig into the detail in these kind of matchups and evaluate the possibility that Giagos might show up with improved strategy and game plan and tactics and win this fight. But we also have to consider the fact that Hadzovic might be doing the same, because let's be real, his takedown defense is so bad. He must know how bad it is. He must know that it's holding him back in his career. Now, I said this about Megan Anderson on last week's card when she fought Felicia Spencer, and I said the reason why I didn't bet Spencer was because even though Anderson's takedown defense is so bad, you have to assume that fighters are on a journey of continual self-improvement, and someone like Anderson, someone like Hadzovic is going to be in the gym every day working hard on their takedown defense. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're stubborn, or they're not capable, or they're just athletically incapable of tightening up a weakness. We saw that with Anderson. You know, her takedown defense and ground game looked worse than ever against Felicia Spencer. Like, what is she doing in the gym? I just don't know. It's just so bad. But with Hadzovic, there were signs in his last fight against Polo Reyes that he is tightening up his takedown defense and ground game, because he actually shot a really nice deep double leg takedown on Reyes for the first time in this fight and got some ground control. Now, his takedown defense looked horrendous against Alan Patrick, horrendous against Marcin Held, but this fight was, you know, almost coming up to 18 months ago. Hadzovic, 32 years old, still room for improvement. Maybe he has made big improvements to his takedown defense and ground game, which makes this a more interesting fight, because Giagos absolutely has the grappling to ragdoll Hadzovic around the octagon. But if Hadzovic has developed takedown defense and he can keep this fight standing, I believe he'll win a stand-up fight. So that's why this is a complex fight to bet, guys. There's a lot to unpack and a lot to think about. We probably cannot trust Giagos to have made the improvements I spoke about, which makes him a risky bet, even though he is a big underdog at odds of around 2.60 plus 160 for an implied probability of 38%. You know, to get any value here, you really got to cap this fight at about 50-50. And one thing that concerns me about betting this fight is, if Hadzovic has developed takedown defense and keeps this fight standing, Giagos is in trouble. Or if Giagos does come out the gate spamming takedowns relentlessly, but Hadzovic is able to quickly pop back up to his feet, Giagos won't be achieving much in terms of scoring on the judges' scorecards with his takedowns, and at the same time, by Hadzovic popping back up quickly, it will accelerate the rate at which Giagos will slow down. So there's a lot to unpack here, guys. A lot of ways this fight could play out. A lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainties, a lot of complexities, and these are just not the kind of fights I like to bet on. I guess you could find value on Giagos if you really, really wanted to, but like I always say, the key to making money in this game is to consistently put your money in strong positions, and I don't feel like either of these guys is a strong position to put your money in, so I would recommend passing. I know it's really boring, but that's the name of the game. Like I say, Denise Coates is balling out of control because she baits people into making bad betting decisions. And that fight, you know, there ain't no safe bets in that fight, put it that way. So now we move on to the next fight, the final fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is Ilia Latifi against Volkan No Time Oezdemir. Now, just like the last fight, this is a very complicated matchup. A very, very complicated matchup where we have to make some assumptions to try and figure out how this fight could play out. And we need to read between the lines and really dig into the detail. The devil is in the detail. And I know these videos will irritate a certain percentage of people that watch me. And I don't actually know why they watch me, because they tend to get irritated by my style. But they will get irritated because there are people that like to work in absolutes. They like to work in black and white, right or wrong. And they don't understand that there is no such thing as right or wrong. All there is different ways a scenario can play out and assigning different probabilities to each scenario. And they also don't know that there are scenarios that could play out that we don't even know about yet. And they also don't understand that there are variables at play which can really have an impact on each of those scenarios. You know, people come here and they're like, just give us picks, or, you know, they just, who's going to win? You know, you never bet, you pass all the time. And they just like, give me picks, tell me who's going to win. And what they don't understand is there is no way to know who is going to win. No pick is correct. No pick is right. There is no right or wrong. On any given night, Oezdemir can win. On any given night, Latifi can win. And a lot of people find that difficult to process. They cannot wrap their head around that. But when you do wrap your head around that concept, that's when you can start to make big money in this game. So I'm going to talk about this fight now. It's a complex fight. It's an interesting fight. And I do have a strong lean on this fight, which will go against what a lot of people watching this video will feel. But that's why they call it gambling. And that's why quite often in life, people that look at things differently have a lot more success than the herd. Because they view the world through different eyes. Remember that expression, when everyone else moves right, you move left. So I'm going to talk about this fight now, and I will have to make some assumptions on where both guys are at. And maybe those assumptions are right, maybe those assumptions are wrong. But really, whenever you're giving out a pick or a prediction, it's all assumptions. There's no right or wrong. Fuck it, let's get into it. So I have really, really strong suspicions that Father Time has caught up with Ilir Latifi. Because he's now 35 years old, he's had over 20 pro fights, and he looked like total shit against Corey Anderson and Tyson Pedro. This fight against Ovin St. Preux, because it ended quite quickly, might have masked the inevitable. But Latifi did not look good against Pedro, didn't look good against Anderson at all. What's interesting is the last time I was impressed by Latifi was when he fought Ryan Bader almost 3 years ago in a fight that he lost, which is quite ironic. But I have not been at all impressed with Latifi since then. His cardio is definitely on the decline, which is a sign that Father Time is catching up to him. Maybe recurring injuries are making it difficult for him to train at this stage in his career. Maybe his testosterone levels are dramatically reducing because he's now past the age of 33, and at the age of 33, generally speaking, on average, a male's testosterone levels start to rapidly decrease, which makes it harder to train in the gym because you don't have the motivation and drive and aggression that you used to when you were a younger man. Lots of factors, and I know that, fat ass 96 in the comments will say, oh, but what about DC, bro? He's 40 years old, he's still going strong. Yes, I know, my friend. There is a concept, a word that is an outlier. I will search Google for it now. So an outlier is basically a person that stands above the herd, stands above the average or the common, the general rule. There will always be outliers in everything in life. Daniel Cormier is the outlier, but generally speaking, when an athlete goes past the age of 33, they will start to decline quite rapidly the further they get away from the age of 33. You could call me an outlier because I look at things very differently when it comes to betting on MMA and fighting. So there are outliers with everything. Yes, I know there are outliers in the world like Daniel Cormier, but generally speaking, there's a high probability Ilir Latifi is in the tail end of his career and on a decline. So, with that being said, Latifi is probably on a decline, whereas Volkan Oezdemir is only 29 years old and possibly making big improvements from fight to fight. We often learn more from our losses than we do from our wins, and Oezdemir suffered a devastating loss in a title fight against Daniel Cormier, where it would have been quite clear to him he was nowhere near winning a UFC title. He would have learned a lot from that. Also suffered a bad loss in the main event fight against Anthony Smith. Would have learnt a lot from that, and I feel he got robbed a little bit against Dominic Reyes. I actually scored this fight for Oezdemir, but he would have learnt a lot from this loss as well. So I've no doubt that Oezdemir is making big improvements, hasn't even hit his prime yet at 29 years old, going to be making big improvements from fight to fight, and 3 losses will have enabled him to learn a lot about himself. So just bear that in mind when I go on to talking about Latifi here. So Latifi has a very, very predictable style of fighting. I really wish that I could use UFC footage to show you what I'm talking about in these breakdowns, because I think if I could use UFC footage to show you what I'm seeing, it would be very difficult for you guys watching this video to disagree with me. I really do. It's great when I can use, footage from outside the UFC like we did with Darko Stosic earlier on. I would really love to show you some footage of Latifi, but obviously I can't because this video will get flagged for copyright. But Latifi has a very, very predictable style of fighting. Very predictable. He fights in bursts. Kind of similar to what Tyron Woodley does. Not quite the same, obviously they're two completely different people, but a similar system, I guess. And what Latifi does, obviously he hits very hard, Obviously, he's a strong offensive wrestler. But because he's a big, explosive guy that's getting old now, doesn't really have the cardio to fight at a high pace for 3 rounds. So what he does is the complete opposite from Christos Giagos. We just spoke about Giagos not managing his cardio very well. Sorry, not pacing himself very well, which means he slows down as the fight goes on. And Latifi is very good at pacing himself. Latifi understands his limitations. He understands he can't fight at a high pace for 3 rounds. So for that reason, he fights in bursts. So what you see Latifi doing is he will stay on the outside. He will give up control of the centre of the octagon to his opponent. And every 30 or 40 seconds, or once a minute, you will see Latifi burst forward and uncork an explosive 5 or 6 strike combo, or he'll shoot a takedown. And if he has his opponent hurt when he bursts forward with that combination, he will then go for the kill, like he did against Ovin St. Preux, and got a very, very quick win. Or if he gets a takedown, he'll obviously have a period of top control. If when he bursts forward and uncorks that combination, doesn't really do that much damage, maybe his opponent covers up, maybe they catch him with a counter, maybe they circle out of danger, you'll then see Latifi retreat, and he does exactly the same thing if his opponent stuffs the takedown attempt. You'll then see him retreat, go back to the outside, and just focus on using his power in reverse to put his opponent into a defensive shell. They say the best form of defense is offense. That's what Latifi does. So fighters then react to that in 2 different ways, because what Latifi's doing is he's bursting forward with an explosive attack, like a big combination of power strikes or a takedown, and then he's kind of seeing where that goes. If he's hurt the guy or if he's got a takedown, he can have some top control. And if he doesn't have success, he retreats. More often than not, he has to retreat, partly because he's very small for the division, so it's not easy for him to land power strikes. We'll get into that in a little bit later on. So if he does have success, he has top control on the ground, or he'll try and go for the kill and get a knockout. But if he retreats, he's then trying to recharge his batteries for the next burst, and he'll take 30-40 seconds before he bursts again, another minute. He recharges his batteries, catches his breath, and you can physically see him do this. If you go back and watch his last fight against Corey Anderson or Tyson Pedro, it's very easy to see him do this. Burst forward, if he doesn't have success, retreats, catches his breath, and he hopes that he's done enough with that burst to also make his opponent fight in that kind of rhythm of bursts and then recharge, and then bursts and then recharge. He's hoping that he's either hurt his opponent enough or scared them enough with his power, or got in on a deep enough takedown attempt to make them think twice about coming forward, because they don't want to run onto a big counter or a big takedown attempt. So he baits people into fighting in this rhythm where burst, recharge, burst, recharge, and that enables him to manage his cardio and pace himself for a 3-round fight. The complete opposite of what Giagos does, where he just goes red line and flat out for 3 rounds. If Latifi redlined it, he would literally be gassed within 3 or 4 minutes. But Latifi's smart enough to make that tactical adjustment. The tactical adjustment that Kevin Lee should have made against RDA, and he didn't, probably through bad coaching. His coaches in between rounds giving him terrible advice. But that's interesting here, because that type of style is very predictable. It is very easy to game plan for, and I believe that's why Latifi lost this fight against Corey Anderson, because Corey Anderson trains with Mark Henry, who's one of the best coaches in the world. And if I am a guy from Wales that sits at his desk all day in his pants watching fighting, if I can identify these patterns and come up with game plans to counteract them, then one of the best MMA coaches in the world, like Mark Henry, is easily going to be able to dissect a fighter like Ilir Latifi. And that's why I think Corey Anderson had so much success against him, because he did something slightly different that Tyson Pedro didn't do. The difference between these 2 fights, if you go back and watch them, is when Latifi charged forward to Anderson, Anderson stuffed the takedown or circled away from the combination or just covered up and blocked. And then immediately as Latifi reset and looked to recharge, Anderson stayed on him. Didn't give him any space or time to recover. which really zapped the cardio of Latifi, because as he was exerting all this energy, bursting forward, then went back to reset, Anderson was straight on him, no time to breathe, pumping the jab, the leg kicks, making him work. And you don't even really have to do anything to Latifi when he's recharging. You don't have to land you don't have to land on him. You don't have to drive him into the cage and work him in the clinch. You don't have to make him defend takedowns. You've just got to make him think about all these things, so he's still exerting energy. You have to put him in a state of panic, and you just have to be in his face and come forward and pressure and feint and just get him reacting. And that was a complete opposite of what Tyson Pedro did. Pedro fell into the trap of when Latifi burst forward, and Latifi would then retreat. He would allow him to recharge, and Pedro would basically just stay in kickboxing range, not really do all that much, and then Latifi would recharge his batteries a minute later, come forward again, rinse, repeat the same cycle, and he won a decision. So that is Latifi in a nutshell, and that is interesting because I believe that Oezdemir is making big improvements from fight to fight. So I've just kind of called Latifi out for having bad cardio, and I've said that if you really make him work, he'll slow down big time. If you go back and watch him in the third round against Anderson and Pedro, he's looking very tired and sloppy. And I know there will be guys there saying, oh yeah, but Oezdemir, he's got bad cardio too. We've seen him slow down against Anthony Smith and Daniel Cormier, and Ovin St. Preux. And yep, you're right. You are absolutely right. But again, guys, listen to me right now. The devil is in the detail. The devil is really, really, really in the detail. Okay? And if you understand the detail of what is going on, you will understand fighting a lot better and you will make more money. Yes, it is true. Oezdemir did slow down against Anthony Smith, Daniel Cormier, and Ovin St. Preux. However, Oezdemir's got time on his side. He's only 29 years old. Ilir Latifi's 35 years old, way past his prime. At this stage in his career, it is more likely that Latifi will be making significant declines from fight to fight. And yes, there are outliers, but generally speaking, he will be declining. It's unlikely his cardio gets any better than how it looked against Anderson and Pedro. Whereas with Oezdemir at 29 years old, he's going to be learning from his mistakes and making big improvements. And he looked absolutely outstanding against Dominic Reyes at his last fight. He left Henry Hoof in Florida to go back and train with his old coaches in Switzerland for this fight against Reyes. And I thought he looked absolutely phenomenal. Now, I believe Dominic Reyes is one of the best fighters in the UFC's light heavyweight division, and maybe this was an off night for him, but I believe he is the biggest threat to John Jones' title out there. I rate Reyes very highly. I think he's excellent, and Oezdemir pushed him all the way. I actually believe Oezdemir won this fight. And what was interesting about this fight was that Oezdemir didn't slow down, and it was contested at a high pace, and Reyes is enormous, absolutely enormous. Legit knockout power in every strike, vicious KO knockout power in his kicks, and he's 6'4" with a 77-inch reach. 6'4", and he struggled to land anything significant on Oezdemir. Latifi is only 5'8". If Dominic Reyes struggled to land power shots on Volkan Oezdemir, Latifi at 5'8" is going to have a very, very difficult time doing this. I mean, there's not a great difference in the reach. In fact, they've got the same reach. Oezdemir and Latifi have both got a 75-inch reach. But the size difference will be enormous, and Oezdemir will absolutely tower over Latifi on fight night. So the size difference is an issue here, and Oezdemir did a great job of staying out of trouble and avoiding Reyes' power strikes, which means Latifi's going to find it very difficult to land, especially with predictable burst style of fighting. So I believe that in this fight we are seeing Latifi, a fighter who's declining and becoming quite predictable and easy to work out. And I see a guy in Oezdemir who is improving and learning from his mistakes, being only 29 years old. His fight against Dominic Reyes was brilliant. It was the best performance of his career. And what's more interesting against Reyes was that he maintained a high pressure style of fighting. He forced Reyes to fight on the back foot. He stayed in Reyes' face and pushed the action. And that is the exact style you need to beat Ilir Latifi. Perfect style to beat Latifi. Because he didn't give Reyes any space or time to breathe. And if you do that to Latifi, Latifi will gas hard and lose. we also just have to quickly cover the I guess the knockout power aspect of both guys. Both guys are known for being knockout artists, but if I'm being truly honest with you, I do think their power is a little bit overstated. I think that this is just one of these examples of two fighters that have found themselves in situations where all the stars have aligned and they have had the illusion that they're knockout artists created out of certain types of matchups put together in a small space of time, which have, like I say, created the illusion that they're more powerful than they actually are. Because if we look at Oezdemir, he has gone the distance with Reyes, didn't really hurt Smith in this fight, didn't hurt DC, got two big knockout wins against Jimmy Manuwa and Misha Serkinov. We know Manuwa and Serkinov are very chinny, and then went the distance with OSP. So I feel like these two fights built the illusion that Oezdemir was more powerful than he actually was, but realistically Serkinov and Manuwa, I mean, they're very chinny. So I don't actually think Oezdemir's got that much knockout power. I just think it was a narrative sold by the MMA media, sold by the UFC to hype this guy up, to justify him getting a title shot against DC, which was way too soon in his career. He wasn't good enough, still isn't good enough, but they needed something to sell it. This is similar to what we're seeing with Johnny Walker at the moment. Johnny Walker's a very low-level guy, but all the stars are aligning for him. He's getting a few highlight reel knockouts in a short space of time. So the MMA media and the UFC hype machine will build him up to create the illusion that he's better than he actually is. Now, I feel something similar has happened with Latifi, because we can see he's gone the distance against Corey Anderson, which is very interesting, because Corey Anderson is also a very chinny fighter that tends to get rocked, dropped, and wobbled in every fight, and Latifi really didn't come close to hurting him in this matchup. Obviously, he submitted OSP, but the submission started with a sequence where Latifi hurt OSP with strikes, but OSP is on a bit of a decline, didn't really hurt Pedro, didn't really hurt Bader, and then as you can see, all of Latifi's wins have come against low-level guys like Hank Stringer, Sean O'Connell, and Chris Dempsey. So again, Latifi's knockout power might be a little bit overstated, so I just wanted to cover that. So how do we wrap this up? So I definitely lean Oezdemir, but at the same time, I'm aware of the fact that I've made tons of assumptions in this fight. I have made assumptions that Latifi's on a decline. I've made assumptions that Oezdemir is going to be improving. And I've made assumptions that Oezdemir's cleaned his cardio up while Latifi hasn't. I've also made assumptions that Oezdemir will be able to work out Latifi's predictable style of fighting, which he may not have, because like we saw from Megan Anderson last week, fighters aren't always the smartest. They don't always take the path of least resistance. They don't always train in the most intelligent ways and use the best game plans. So I've made a lot of assumptions. Just like I made a lot of assumptions with last week's bet on Mike Trezano against Grant Dawson, and that was a bet we lost. They blew up in our face. So I do lean Oezdemir here, but again, just like with Mike Trezano last week, you can't be really confident in a fight like this, either side, because there are so many variables and so many ways it could play out and so many assumptions being made. Now, this is why I always say, if you consistently put your money in strong positions, long term you will make money, and that's why you've always got to look to put your money in strong positions and not marginal situations. At the current odds, this is a marginal position for both guys, because if we look at the odds on Latifi, currently around about even money, around about 1.95 for moneyline odds of minus 105 for an implied probability of 51%. There is no way that I would bet Latifi here, because I don't believe he's got a 50% chance of winning. I don't even believe he's got a 60% chance of winning. I definitely favour Oezdemir. But if we look at the odds on Oezdemir, currently around about 1.87, which is minus 115 for an implied probability of 53%. So the bookies are currently seeing this as around about a 50-50 fight, which I disagree with. I actually cap Oezdemir at close to 60%, around about 60%, because we're making loads of assumptions, but I just have a feeling Latifi's going that way and Oezdemir's going that way. And I've been very critical of Oezdemir in the past. Very, very critical. If you've been a member of my website for a long time, you'll know how critical I've been of Oezdemir. But that fight against Dominic Reyes for me was a clear sign he's turning the corner, and the devil is in the detail. So, from a betting perspective, this fight is complicated, because there are a lot of jabronis that watch these videos that can't smell what I'm cooking, and they just want, give me a pick, tell me the pick, who's gonna win, give me a pick, bro. And then if I say, okay, Oezdemir is going to win this fight, and then he gets knocked out in 30 seconds, oh, you suck, bro, you were wrong, your picks are shit. They're just so dumb, so dumb. What I'm saying here is I cap Oezdemir at around about 60%. I really do. But that means I also credit Latifi with having a big chance of winning this, because he does hit hard, he does have home advantage. We can't trust that Oezdemir is going to look as good as he did against Reyes. Maybe Oezdemir did slow down, maybe Oezdemir showed up and put in the training camp of his life against Reyes, and after that loss now he's not motivated enough to do the same against Ilir Latifi. Or maybe he's on a 3-fight losing streak and he realises if he loses one more fight he's going to get released from the UFC, so maybe he's put in the best training camp of his life and he's going to go out and fuck Latifi up. Maybe that's going to happen. There's lots of maybes when I talk about this fight, and that is why it's tricky for betting. Now the way I'm playing this, I'll tell you exactly how I'm playing this. And I know the jabronis, Ginger Pubes 46 watching this fucking video, leaving a negative comment, will not be able to process what I'm about to tell him. But the way I'm playing this is I cap Volkan Oezdemir having around a 60% chance of winning this fight. So at the current odds there is value there, but not enough for me because I'm greedy. And let me tell you why I'm greedy. Let's reflect on Mike Trizano against Grant Dawson. Okay? Mike Trizano against Grant Dawson was a fight that could have gone either way. But we bet Trizano underdog odds are around about 2.40, plus 140 for an implied probability of 42%. That was a giant margin over the betting sites in a risky fight that could go either way. If we can get juicy, decent odds on Oezdemir, I will bet him, because it's a fight that could go either way, and it may happen, because if we look at the odds movement at the moment, everyone's on Latifi. All the casual bettors, all the dickheads on Sherdog, they are all betting Latifi. We can see his odds have been continually declining, because the casual betting public don't understand fighting on a deeper level, okay? Oezdemir's odds are improving, yeah? So if Oezdemir's odds are improving, we might get another chance to bet here, like we did with Trizano, and get our money in favourable odds. Now, I capped Trizano at having a roughly 50-50 chance of winning, so at those odds of 2.40 plus 140, there was good value there. I don't need those kind of odds to bet Oezdemir. I would take Oezdemir odds around 2.0, which is plus 100, or 2.10, which is plus 110. I would take Oezdemir around about those odds, because with that giving him an implied probability at 2.10 of around 48%, with me capping him at 60%, that's a decent margin for me, and that's why you can often let the odds make a decision for you. There's no way I'd bet Latifi here. I think he's a bad bet. I think Oezdemir's going to get it done, but I need more, and I need more odds. I need better odds, because there's a big risk here lose, and I know a lot of jabronis watching this video will not understand that concept, but I need more value on Oezdemir, and if it doesn't get there, I'll just pass. It doesn't fucking bother me at all. You know, there are plenty of good bets coming up on the next few events. I'll be absolutely fine with passing, but the odds are moving in the right direction, which means I think we may get a chance to bet Oezdemir around about 2.0, 2.10. Remember, this video is being recorded 8 days before UFC Stockholm takes place, so still plenty of time for the odds to improve. But with that, guys, that's basically it for today's video. I hope you appreciated it. I'm sorry I didn't have any bets for you today, but hopefully the odds on Oezdemir move in our favour and we'll be able to lock in a bet on him. If they don't, no big deal. Remember, the key to making money in this game is to consistently put your money in strong positions, and if you do that over time, you will make a lot more than you lose. But that's it for today, guys. If you want the live stream for UFC Stockholm, hit the like button below. This video needs to get 300 likes. Help it get there. Don't just sit there. Hit the like button. Also, please subscribe if you haven't already. Take care, and I'll see you at part 3 very soon.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love, and that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things, I gotta just let it all out. I'm talking about the shit they've been talking about.